it's always a pleasure to be with St. Mary's Road United Church. You guys are our friends from afar, and as my people in the village say, they always say, pass my greetings to them that are across the oceans. I'm trying to do the literal translation. The ocean is quite significant because in our folklore, when you're talking about a story that happened far, far away, you always say, that's folklore. The Zimbabwe bird. That's the Zimbabwe bird. Lots of stories around that. But anyway, when you talk about stories, you say, in a land far, far away across oceans. So greetings to you all from Zimbabwe, especially to Cynthia, Leanne, Dawn, Twyla, Marissa, and Ken for all the hard work that you do as part of the St. Mary's Road Zimbabwe committee that is helping us with this project, which we simplify as the Men Can Cook project. Well, as Pastor Ken and Pastor Phil and Dan have already said, we are trying to understand how to work alongside culture to bring transformation. So when I heard that you were reflecting on that verse that says, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For me, in my village, I am dreaming of that new heaven and new earth. And how can we practically put it together in Zimbabwe, in this poor village or vulnerable village where people are trying to find ways to escape poverty? So we saw that one way of doing that is to address change through culture. And we thought that it is more viable. So a lot of people will say, how can you say we can address gender issues through culture when we know that traditionally, and as has been read in the Bible, cultures carry a lot of harmful practices, not just in Zimbabwe, but everywhere, anywhere in the world. Cultures do carry certain aspects that are good and also certain aspects that are harmful. So people may say, why? So I want to give you a few points about why. So the first one is localization. When you want to work with people, the first thing is you have to believe them. You have to work together with them in their communities, eating what they eat, which is what Dan was doing for the past month, sleeping where they sleep. Dan did not stay in a hotel. He was right in the community, waking up to goats and chicken and cows, and going to the field and checking on the crops and digging as well and harvesting. And so that's localization. So when we all work together with the same understanding that people and local capacities are valuable, then there is trust. And when you generate that trust, then there is engagement, there is learning, there is innovation, there's experimentation, and of course, there is scaling up. So this is one reason why we as SCORE try to leverage culture in addressing gender-based barriers or gender inequalities. The second thing is that we do value indigenous knowledge systems. It is not true to think that everything indigenous is wrong. There are things that we can learn. Even you in Canada, you can also learn from my village. And my village can also learn something from you, including the indigenous people in Canada. So what we are saying is that we value indigenous knowledge systems. And when you do that, it may look strange because you are walking on kind of like new territory. The way development has been done in the past has been good, but it can always be improved. So this idea that knowledge systems are just imported from outside of Africa, in this case, outside of Zimbabwe, Mwenezi, which is my village, does have its own strengths. But you can also improve it and refine it by embracing the knowledge and capacity that already exists in those indigenous knowledge systems that are there. And when you embrace and put that together, you catalyze the processes and innovation will take place. And once innovation has taken place, you now see new paths, new ways of understanding, new ways of finding meaning. I think Dan spent a lot of time trying to understand, when you say this, what exactly do you mean? New ways of finding meaning. And of course, when you do meaning making, then of course you start to realize that maybe certain cultures have certain strengths that can be leveraged, and there are also certain weaknesses that can be improved on.
Yeah, a beautiful example of that, Ray, if you can just quickly touch on it, is the ability that SCORE had to influence through the COVID program working with the traditional healers. And we have three to 5 minutes left, but maybe you could touch on that as an example of what you're talking about.
Yes, for example, when the COVID pandemic hit Zimbabwe, the first thought that we all had was to use the formal medical systems to address the challenge. So they were the medical systems that are formalized, where we have a doctor, a hospital, a clinic, were the ones in front leading the fight against COVID. But in my village, we saw that a small fraction of people were going to the hospital either for testing or to talk about their symptoms. There is a day that my team looked at who was going to the hospital and who was going to the traditional healers. They discovered that less than 20 people had visited the hospital to talk about, oh, I feel a headache, I feel like I have a fever. Yet, early in the morning, around 3 a.m., over 400 people were at the traditional healers' shrine, looking for assistance and all the problems were all COVID related. Now, when you see that, you begin to realize that there was a strength. In fact, the primary message bearers were supposed to be the traditional healers because they had the people. People were coming to them. They were readily available and they could attend to them. So SCORE now catalyzed the relationship between the Ministry of Health and the traditional healers and the prophets. They brought these three parties together, worked together on COVID prevention measures that can be understood and appreciated by all of them. And then from there, we started to see a reduction in COVID infections, an increase in interest to talk about washing hands, putting on masks, and of course, we started to build a healthy community. So this is one good example. The other one is with our Men Can Cook. Basically, what we are doing is that we are creating a safe space for men and women to come together collectively, discuss their issues, and try to find solutions. So with the Men Can Cook, we do have the Men's Forum on Gender. On the Men's Forum on Gender, this is exclusively a men forum. There are no women. The facilitator is male, and everybody there is male. Why create that? It is in line with our cultural values, where we do have the Men's Indaba, which is a place where men sit and discuss ideas. Now, when you think of it, men are able to moan, talk about the gender inequalities in the villages, talk about how that has affected their relationships with their wives and children, in a safe space where they can be vulnerable and where they can listen to each other. Men are able to challenge each other without embarrassment. And as a result, people start to listen and they start to engage and to innovate and to come up with new ways of working together. For example, when Dan was in Zimbabwe, he saw men that are now cooking for their children. So a man literally practices cooking and takes the food to the child, something that would not happen. We also saw men who stand up to vouch for women, to say, I want my wife to also have a passport. I want my wife to also have a phone so that they can do business. So those transformative measures only happened because we leveraged culture. We provided a conducive environment for men to mourn, lament the losses that would happen with the loss of power, but also think about the way forward in trying to address this challenge. In the meantime, women groups are busy thinking of the topics that men should talk about. So when women sit down under a tree, they are thinking about what are the real gender issues that affect us every day. And the gender facilitator for the women's group is picking up those conversations and feeding them to the men's group. Now, women also are now the ones providing evaluation. So when Dan was in Zimbabwe, he spent a lot of time with women. What is exactly changing? How are relationships at home? Is it getting any better? So you can see that we are engaging men and boys for the benefit of women and girls. And we are using our cultural system to leverage that energy and momentum to be able to achieve that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, do you need to run?
No.
No.
You're just anxious about us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can always cut my stuff. I can always cut my stuff.
Yeah.
It was, I guess 2 parts with it is one, is there any fear that there is the undermining of the culture through these other initiatives? I mean, you built up the trust, and you have that trust. But I guess one of my concerns is one, will they feel like it gets undermined, the wisdom, the deep roots of the culture? And the other part of that is, do you have any fears of a reverting back when the program ends? Or like how deep will those roots go, or the new fruit as it were change?
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, I want to just underline the fact that our culture is a very oral culture. And we master everything that we are taught in the head. So it's all mental work. You have to, we don't read books as you do, you guys. You write things down. So the source of information is very important. So in your case, you want a peer-reviewed paper. For me, I want the information to come from the chief. If it comes from the chief, it's peer-reviewed. If it comes from the traditional leader, it's peer-reviewed. Where am I going with this? So when you bring men together to discuss issues, and they themselves come out and talk to the community about it, it means that information has been peer-reviewed, and it has been validated, and now it stays here. So even for boys, they now say, daddy said that it's okay to also cook at home. And daddy actually did a practical demonstration. Now, that is it. We can write it in books and everything. Dan knows that people in my village will not read his reports. So he came up with an idea of pictures and drawings, because they will look at pictures and drawings, of course. But here, I'm not saying that they cannot read, but I'm just saying we are from oral cultures. So that knowledge preservation takes place naturally when you harness those cultural mouthpieces that are normally used to convey messages. So in this project, chiefs are involved, senior church leaders are there, senior traditional leaders are there, men who are fathers, because the father carries a lot of power. Now, on the side of women, it is the aunt, it is the mother-in-law, it is the grandmother. Those are the power bearers. And when they say, this is the order, that's the order. Now, they are also involved in a safe space. And when we say it's safe for women, people would think that women are just like the only ones that are, women are just the terrible ones that are doing these things. But remember, even women amongst themselves. Because women that are reading the same passage that you're reading about women being commodified, can also be telling other women, no. Even in the Bible, a man cannot cook. Even in the, they might be saying such things, So that safe space is for women to also learn together, and then they pass that knowledge to the younger generation in a very safe space. Then in terms of having this fear that culture might undermine the progress, that is exactly the reason why SCORE exists, and that is the